My wife Sarah ran off with my brother Keith, leaving me her dying son. 15 years later, they mocked me, asking about the boy they left to die until he walked in, a grown man. Their faces were priceless. You ever walk into your own house and instantly feel like the air's plotting against you? That was me. Me that Thursday night. I just survived an 11-hour workday full of fake smiles, unpaid overtime, and a boss who believed good management meant replying to emails with thumbs up emojis. All I wanted was to loosen my tie, grab that leftover pepperoni pizza from the fridge, and let Netflix judge me for watching Storage Wars again. But instead, I opened the front door to what I can only describe as the kind of silence you hear in crime documentaries right before they find the body. The lights were dim, the TV off, and no sign of life, except for the faint smell of lavender candles and betrayal. Normally, Sarah would be humming some Taylor Swift song while pretending not to burn dinner, and my brother Keith would be in the garage cussing at the door he'd been fixing for 3 weeks straight. But not tonight. The place felt hollow, like someone pressed mute on my life. I remember calling out, "Sarah, nothing, Keith." Still nothing. That was my first red flag because Keith never turned down a free meal or a chance to tell me how I was using the wrong kind of wrench for everything. I tossed my keys on the counter, loosened my tie, and that's when I saw it. Mason, 5 years old, curly hair, Spider-Man pajamas, curled up on the recliner like a tiny hostage. The poor kid was clutching a crumpled piece of paper, eyes red from crying. He looked up at me with that lost puppy stare that could melt a glacier. "Uncle Luke." He sniffled. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Keith said they're sorry. Oh, hell no. I dropped my briefcase, walked over, and gently took the note from his little hands. My stomach did this weird thing. Like it knew it was about to read something that had ruined pizza for me forever. The handwriting was Sarah's, cursive, neat, dramatic, like she thought this was a breakup scene in a romantic movie instead of a felony-level betrayal. Luke, I'm sorry. This isn't how you deserve to find out. Keith and I are in love. We didn't mean for it to happen, but we can't fight it anymore. Please take care of Mason for now. He deserves stability. Don't try to find us. We need to start over together. I just stood there blinking, rereading, waiting for the hidden camera crew to jump out yelling, "Gotcha." But no one did. It was just me, Mason, and the sound of my world doing a nosedive. Keith, my brother. The same Keith who used to steal my Halloween candy, crash my dates, and still owed me $400 from 2017. I always thought his low point was the time he tried to sell NFTs of his beard hair on eBay. Turns out he had lower gears. Sarah and Keith together, the math wasn't mate. My wife and my brother, it was like betrayal decided to host a family reunion. I sat on the edge of the couch staring at the letter, my mind glitching like bad Wi-Fi. My chest felt tight, not heart attack tight, but wow, life just turned into a sitcom written by Satan tight. Mason sniffled again. Are they coming back? I looked at him and something in me snapped. Not in an angry way, in a no one else is going to fix this kind of way. I forced a smile, even though it probably looked like I was having a nervous breakdown in slow motion. Nah, buddy, I said. They went on a long trip. He frowned. Without me? I exhaled through my nose, rubbed the back of my neck, and muttered. Yeah, apparently love makes people stupid. He tilted his head. What's stupid? Your Aunt Sarah and Uncle Keith, I said automatically. Then I realized I shouldn't be teaching a 5-year-old new vocabulary words of trauma. I mean, people who forget what's important. He nodded solemnly like he understood the weight of betrayal and tax evasion. Then he whispered, "Can I have ice cream?" And just like that, my new job started. Full-time single dad, part-time emotional triage nurse. I walked into the kitchen, still holding that cursed note, and opened the freezer. No ice cream, of course. The woman who left me for my brother had also taken the damn Ben and Jerry's. I leaned on the counter trying to piece it all together. The affair, the timing, the lies, and the cherry on top. They'd left her nephew behind like he was an unwanted Amazon package. I looked back at Mason. He was watching cartoons now, probably trying to forget everything. His little feet swung off the recliner, too small to touch the floor. That image stuck with me. This tiny kid abandoned by adults who were supposed to love him. I'd been betrayed, sure, but he'd been discarded. There's a special place in hell for people like that. I poured us both bowls of cereal because that's the only dinner left in the emotional survival handbook. As we ate, I tried to think of what to do next. Call the cops? Nah, what would I even say? Hi, my brother ran off with my wife. Can you send a therapist and maybe a flamethrower? I thought about calling Mom, but she'd just say, I always knew Sarah was too skinny to be trustworthy, and Dad would probably mail me a pamphlet about forgiveness, which I'd promptly use as kindling, so I kept quiet. After Mason went to sleep, I sat there on the couch staring at our wedding photo. Sarah was smiling, her head tilted just so, like she'd practiced that look in a mirror. Keith had been my best man that day. He gave a speech about brotherhood and loyalty. If irony had a face, it'd be his. I remember thinking how he'd always envied me. My steady job, my house, my marriage. He'd once said, "You make it look easy, man." Guess he decided to try it himself. I poured myself a drink. Whiskey neat. The kind of drink that burns enough to remind you you're still alive. The clock ticked past midnight, and my house felt foreign, like I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. My wedding ring suddenly weighed 10 pounds. I took it off, set it on the counter next to the note, and said out loud, "Well, Keith, you finally fixed something. My marriage." I don't know if it was the whiskey talking or the sheer absurdity, but I started laughing like ugly laughing. The kind that sounds half hysterical, half sane, because honestly, who gets replaced by their brother? Me. That's who. Luke the loyal. The guy who lent his brother money and his wife patience. Both never returned. Eventually, the laughter died down, and I just sat there listening to the hum of the fridge. Then, I noticed Mason's Spider-Man backpack by the door. Inside were crayons, a half-eaten sandwich, and a note from his mom. "Lisa, thanks for watching him again, sis. You're a lifesaver. He's been coughing a bit, but it's fine. I'll pick him up Sunday. Lisa, the sister-in-law who cried about her son's terminal illness 6 months ago. The same illness that apparently didn't stop her from posting vacation selfies with hashtags like #healing in Hawaii. I brushed it off back then because Sarah swore Lisa was telling the truth. But now I wondered if the entire family was allergic to honesty. I leaned back and muttered, "Guess lies run in the genes." The next morning hit me like a freight train of reality. Mason woke me up at 6 a.m. holding a frying pan. "Can you make pancakes?" I blinked at him, hair sticking up like I'd lost a fight with gravity. "Kid, I barely make coffee without violating fire codes." He giggled totally unfazed. "I can help." And somehow, between flour explosions and a burned spatula, we made something that vaguely resembled pancakes. He grinned. Syrup all over his face. And for a moment, the world didn't feel like it had ended. It just shifted. That's when it hit me. Sarah and Keith were gone, but Mason was still here. And despite the chaos, he trusted me. He looked at me like I was some kind of superhero, a broke, emotionally scarred superhero with no cape and a stack of unpaid bills. But still, after breakfast, I cleaned up the mess and grabbed my phone. Sarah hadn't texted. Keith hadn't called. They'd really done it. Vanished. Maybe that should have broken me. But instead, I felt something else. Clarity. If they thought I'd crumble, they didn't know me at all. They'd handed me a wrecked life and a scared kid. Fine. I'd rebuild it better, stronger, louder. And every laugh, every win, every damn pancake would be proof that their betrayal didn't kill me. It just gave me purpose. I walked outside, the morning air sharp and cool. The neighborhood was waking up, sprinklers hissing, dogs barking, the usual suburban symphony. I looked at the empty driveway where Keith's beat-up truck used to sit and smiled bitterly. "Guess it's just us now, kid," I said under my breath. From behind me, Mason yelled, "Can I have ice cream for lunch?" I turned around, grinning. "You know what? Sure, why not? It's a new world order." He cheered like I'd just declared a national holiday. And maybe, in a way, I had. That night, after Mason fell asleep, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, I stood by the window, staring out into the dark. I wasn't sure where Sarah and Keith had gone, or why betrayal always traveled in pairs. But one thing was clear. They didn't take my backbone with them. I picked up the note one last time, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a drawer. Not as a keepsake, as evidence. Because one day when the dust settled and karma finished its rounds, I wanted to remember exactly where it all began, with a letter and a silence too loud to ignore. You ever look back on a memory and realize you were the biggest idiot in the room? Yeah, that was me 6 months before my wife and my brother pulled their little Houdini act. Back then, life still looked normal, boring, predictable. We fight over takeout, kind of normal. I had no clue the universe was just stretching before the sprint. It started with a phone call from Lisa, Sarah's older sister. Picture a human panic button with Wi-Fi access. She was crying so hard I thought she'd accidentally glued herself to something again. "Luke," she sobbed. "It's Mason. The doctors say it's bad. Really bad." Now, I'm not the type to laugh at bad news, but Lisa had a track record. This was the same woman who once called 911 because her son sneezed twice. But this time, she threw in the phrase that makes everyone's brain short-circuit. Rare blood disorder. Sarah dropped her phone like it burned her. "We have to go," she said, already grabbing her keys like she was auditioning for Fast and Furious, Suburban Panic. We drove to Lisa's house, which looked like Pinterest had thrown up. Glitter candles, fake plants, inspirational quotes like live, laugh, love on every wall. If love cured diseases, Mason would have been immortal by now. Lisa greeted us at the door with mascara rivers down her face and a wine glass that was way too full for someone dealing with tragedy. "He's sleeping," she whispered. "The doctor said he might not have much time." I remember walking into Mason's room, heart pounding. He looked pale, small, curled up under a blanket with superhero prints. His breathing was shallow. Or maybe I was just imagining it, Sarah gasped, covering her mouth. I knelt beside him, feeling something in my chest tighten. Fear, sadness, guilt all at once. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, scrolling medical websites, and crying quietly. "What kind of world lets a child suffer like this?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer, so I did what guys do when we don't know what to say. I made coffee and tried to fix what couldn't be fixed. I called doctors, Googled experimental treatments, even researched bone marrow donation. Anything to help. Lisa, meanwhile, became a permanent fixture at our house. She'd drop Mason off for rest and vanish for hours. Sometimes she'd show up smelling like margaritas, talking about grief, therapy, and self-care. I didn't question it at first. Grief makes people weird, right? But then I started noticing things like how Mason's sick days always lined up with Lisa's girls' nights, or how her Instagram stories were less about hospitals and more about hotel rooftops and poolside mojitos. Still, Sarah refused to see it. "She's coping," she said, eyes red from crying. "Don't judge her." Yeah, okay. But when coping looks like bottle service, I start to question the diagnosis. Weeks passed and Mason didn't get worse. In fact, he looked fine, better even. He'd run around the house laughing, eating jelly sandwiches, and playing video games. But every time I brought it up, Sarah shut me down. "You don't understand how rare diseases work, Luke. They can look fine one minute and crash the next." Sure, and my car runs better after I ignore the oil change light. Then came the doctor visits. Lisa would take Mason out for treatments that apparently didn't require hospitals, nurses, or any receipts. I asked for medical records once and she snapped. "Oh, now you're a doctor." Yeah, I wasn't. But I was something worse. A husband who smelled but didn't want to admit it. The turning point came one afternoon when I came home early from work. Lisa was in our kitchen laughing on the phone. Mason was on the couch watching cartoons, not a hint of sickness in sight. When she noticed me, her smile vanished like I was the repo man. "Oh, Luke, I didn't hear you come in." "Clearly," I said, eyeing her phone. "How's the little guy doing?" She gave me a shaky smile. "Up and down, you know, chronic fatigue." "Aha. From all the Call of Duty marathons." She froze. "Excuse me?" "Nothing," I said, pouring coffee. I didn't even want. Just weird that his terminal illness doesn't stop him from outgunning half the internet. Her face twitched, but she recovered fast. "Children need distractions." "Doctor's orders, right?" I said, and I assume the doctor's orders also include bottomless brunches and cocoon getaways. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" "That maybe grief looks better with a tan." She huffed, grabbed her purse, and stormed out, muttering something about toxic energy. I just stood there shaking my head. Toxic energy. Lady, your whole family runs on it. When Sarah came home, Lisa had already gotten to her. "You embarrassed her." She snapped. "She's going through hell, Luke." "Really?" "Because her version of hell comes with ocean views. She needs support. What she needs is an intervention and maybe a calendar reminder that her kid's supposed to be dying." That earned me a week of cold shoulders and microwave dinners. By the third month, Mason had basically moved in. Lisa would pop by with his overnight bag and vanish into thin air. I didn't mind having him around. He was a good kid. Polite, curious, a little too into cereal, but overall easy company. The problem was watching Sarah fall deeper into the drama. She was constantly checking on Lisa, bringing her meals, handling Mason's medication schedule, and crying at random commercials. One night, I found her in the kitchen, staring at the fridge like it held the secrets of the universe. "I can't lose him," she said softly. I wrapped an arm around her. "You won't. He's strong. Kids bounce back." She shook her head. "You don't get it. If Mason dies, Lisa will break. She's barely holding it together. I bit back the urge to say she's holding it together with tequila. Instead, I just nodded because that's what you do when your spouse is emotionally tangled in someone else's web. You wait and hope they don't drag you into it. Then came the fundraiser idea. Sarah decided we should host a charity dinner to raise money for Mason's treatment. She made a website, printed flyers, even convinced my boss to donate. The whole town showed up. Bless their gullible hearts. We raised over $6,000 that night. $6,000. Lisa gave a teary speech about cherishing every moment. People clapped. I wanted to throw a dinner roll. Afterward, she hugged Sarah like she'd just cured cancer. Then she whispered to me, "You see, the world still has good people. Yeah, mostly the ones you just scammed." But again, I stayed quiet. Why? Because I loved my wife. And I didn't want to believe her sister was running a con while her nephew played the prop. That night, while cleaning up, I found something that made my blood run cold. A receipt from a luxury spa in Lisa's purse. Date, same day as Mason's supposed hospital appointment. I slipped it into my pocket like a spy, unsure what to do next. The next morning, I casually dropped it on the counter. Lisa must have dropped this. Sarah picked it up, read it, and frowned. So what? So she was at a spa during his chemo appointment. She said the clinic was relaxing. Yeah, it's called a spa. Sarah, we fought for 2 straight hours. She accused me of being heartless. I accused her of being naive. In the end, I apologized because husbands do that when they're tired and just want pancakes. But deep down, something had shifted. I started paying attention. Every time Lisa mentioned a hospital, I'd ask which one. She'd mumble something vague like the downtown one. When I offered to drive them, she'd say, "It's too emotional." When I called the supposed doctor's office, it didn't exist. That's when I knew Mason wasn't sick. Lisa was lying. But proving it was another story. Sarah was in too deep, emotionally invested, financially involved, spiritually committed to the lie. I figured I'd wait, gather evidence, and drop the truth like a nuke. But I didn't expect the universe to beat me to it. A week later, Lisa announced she was taking a personal retreat. Translation: another vacation. She left Mason with us for the weekend saying he needs stability. Yeah, I bet. That Sunday, Sarah got a text from her sister, just a beach photo with the caption, "Healing vibes only." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I just showed her the screen. And for the first time, I saw a doubt in her eyes. Later that night, Sarah sat in bed, quiet. "Do you think she lied?" she finally asked. I didn't sugarcoat it. "I think Mason's healthier than both of them combined." She didn't answer, but she didn't argue either. The silence was new, uncomfortable, but honest. For once, the noise of Lisa's drama had faded, and all that was left was the hum of truth trying to break through. Looking back, that was the moment the cracks started showing. Sarah had built her loyalty on sand, and Lisa was the tide. Every lie washed a little more of her away. By the time the big betrayal rolled around months later, I realized the fake illness was just rehearsal. Lisa taught Sarah how to lie, and Sarah, bless her heart, became a star pupil. If I'd known then what was coming, I would have skipped the charity dinner and invested in security cameras instead. But hindsight's undefeated. At least now when I look at Mason, healthy and loud and full of life, I know the truth. He was never dying. The only thing terminal in that family was honesty. And trust me, some diseases don't need a cure. They need a mirror. There's no manual for suddenly becoming a single dad to a 5-year-old who thinks vegetables are a government conspiracy. One day, I had a wife who handled the grocery list and argued about throw pillows. The next, I had Mason, a pint-sized tornado with sticky fingers and the energy level of a nuclear reactor. If life had a plot twist button, someone had hit it hard. The first morning after Sarah and Keith's little Bonnie and Clyde escape, I woke up to a crash in the kitchen. I stumbled in wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that said sarcasm loading, only to find Mason standing on the counter trying to pour himself cereal. The bowl was upside down, milk everywhere. And the kid looked at me like, "Yeah, this is fine, buddy," I said, rubbing my eyes. "We do gravity the other way around here." He blinked at me, holding the carton like it was evidence. "I wanted breakfast." "Well, congratulations. You've created abstract art." I grabbed a towel and started mopping up. "Next time, let's keep both feet on the ground and see what happens, huh?" He nodded, solemn as a judge. "Okay, but can we get pancakes tomorrow?" "Sure," I said, because lying to children is how adults survive. That was day 1 of my new job, fatherhood. No experience required. The title came with 0 training, no HR department, and definitely no sick days. The hardest part wasn't the cooking, cleaning, or explaining why you can't feed goldfish cereal. R.I.P. Captain Bubbles. It was the silence. Every night after Mason went to bed, the house felt too big, too empty. There were still pictures of Sarah on the wall, her smile frozen mid-lie. I thought about taking them down, but Mason liked them. "That's Aunt Sarah," he'd say proudly, not knowing she'd swapped family for betrayal. I couldn't tell him the truth. How do you tell a 5-year-old that the people who were supposed to love him just used him like a prop in their soap opera? So, I played along. I said she was traveling. I said Keith was helping her. Lies necessary once. In between balancing work, laundry, and emotional try-off, I tried to figure out how to raise a kid. I googled how to parent a child not technically yours and got results that ranged from call a lawyer to start a blog. Neither helped. The first weekend I took Mason grocery shopping. You know how single dads in commercials look calm, smiling while their kid helps pick apples? Lies. Pure propaganda. Mason treated the grocery store like a NASCAR track. He grabbed everything within arm's reach. Cereal, candy, dog toys. We didn't even have a dog. When I told him no, he crossed his arms and said, "But mommy said yes." Yeah. Well, mommy also said forever. Look how that turned out. We got to the checkout line, my cart overflowing with chaos, and the cashier smiled at me like I was a rookie firefighter holding a flamethrower. First time shopping with a little one. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. She smirked. "You look like you fought a grocery war and lost." "Feels accurate," I said. When we got home, Mason asked if we could build a fort in the living room. I said, sure, figuring it would distract him. 3 hours later, my couch cushions had become Fort Freedom, and I was trapped inside with a 5-year-old general armed with juice boxes. Somewhere between his giggles and my fake surrender, something strange happened. I laughed. Really laughed. The kind of laugh that had been missing for months, buried under lies and work emails. That night, as I tucked him into bed, he said, "You're funny, Uncle Luke." "Don't tell anyone," I whispered. "It'll ruin my reputation." He giggled and fell asleep mid-laugh. I sat there a while just watching him breathe. Maybe this wasn't the life I planned, but damn it, it was real. The next few weeks were trial by fire. I learned the delicate art of getting a kid to eat something green without bribery. I discovered that nap time is more of a suggestion than a rule. And I realized bedtime stories are just adult therapy with plot twists. But for every meltdown, there was a moment that made it worth it. Like when Mason drew a picture of us, me, him, and a weird L-looking dog he apparently wanted and wrote my family in crayon at the top. I stared at that picture for a long time. It hit me right in the chest. I wasn't just a babysitter. I was at his person. One night after a particularly chaotic bedtime involving toothpaste wars and missing pajamas, I sat down with a beer and my thoughts. I hadn't heard from Sarah or Keith. No calls, no texts, no "we made a mistake" messages. I figured they were off living their new fantasy. Probably in some cheap motel arguing over who forgot to pack deodorant. Part of me wanted revenge. The other part, the exhausted pizza for dinner part, just wanted peace. But every time I looked at Mason, I realized something. The best revenge was being the one who stayed. It's funny how fast you adapt. Within a month, I had a system. Wake up, breakfast, drop Mason at preschool, work, come home, dinner, bedtime story, collapse. I started getting good at stuff I'd never done before. I could pack a lunch that didn't look like a food crime. I could braid hair. Okay, maybe not well, but close enough that Mason's teacher didn't call CPS. He started calling me Dad by accident one morning. He said it softly like he was testing the word. I froze mid-sip of coffee. "What did you say, bud?" He blushed. "I meant Uncle Luke." I smiled, pretending it didn't feel like my heart just melted into a puddle. "That's okay," I said. "You can call me whatever you want." He nodded. "Okay, Dad." And just like that, something in me clicked. I wasn't his uncle anymore. I was his home. Of course, not everyone saw it that way. My mom called one evening after hearing the gossip. "Luke, you're not responsible for that child. His mother should. His mother's too busy sipping tequila." I interrupted. "Still, this isn't your burden to bear." "Mom," I said, glancing at Mason building Lego towers in the corner. "He's not a burden. He's the only part of this mess that's innocent," she sighed. "You've always been too soft." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Guess it runs in the family." Parenting alone wasn't just hard, it was humbling. I used to think patience was something you had or didn't. Turns out patience is something you grow right next to the gray hair. Every tantrum taught me that love isn't just hugs and smiles. Sometimes it's sitting on the floor with a crying kid and saying, "Yeah, life sucks, but we'll get through it." There were nights when I'd crash on the couch after he was asleep, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of man I'd become. I wasn't a husband anymore. I wasn't just a brother or an employee. I was a dad to a kid who wasn't even mine by blood, but felt like he was carved straight out of my heart. One Friday night, I found Mason sitting by the window looking out at the stars. "What are you doing, bud?" I asked. "Waiting," he said. "For what?" "For Mommy and Aunt Sarah. They said they'd come back." My throat tightened. I sat beside him. "You know what? Sometimes people say things they don't mean, but that's okay because I'm here." He frowned. "You won't leave?" I shook my head. "Not a chance." He smiled. Small but real. "Then I'm not scared anymore." That was it. The moment that changed everything. In that instant, I stopped being the guy picking up the pieces and became the man building something new. The next morning, Mason asked if we could make pancakes again. I groaned, remembering the last time involved flour explosions and emotional damage to my kitchen. But I agreed. This time though, we got it right. Golden, fluffy, and edible. He looked up at me with syrup on his chin and said, "You're the best cook ever." "Tell that to the fire alarm," I muttered. But inside, I was grinning. Every day after that, I stopped counting what I'd lost and started noticing what I had. We had our little routines. Saturday cartoons, Sunday park trips, late night ice cream emergencies. He'd tell me jokes that made no sense, and I'd laugh anyway. And somewhere in that chaos, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Sometimes life doesn't give you what you asked for. It hands you something better wrapped in chaos and calls it growth. By the time 6 months rolled by, Mason had gained weight, learned to ride a bike, and stopped asking about Sarah. He'd talk about his future now. Astronaut, firefighter, maybe even dinosaur doctor. Still unclear on what that meant. As for me, I stopped being the guy who was left behind. I was the guy who showed up. And let me tell you, that's a promotion no baby shower could ever celebrate. If parenting teaches you anything, it's that something feels off as a sixth sense you should never ignore. 3 months into my accidental fatherhood journey, that feeling hit me like a truck with a PhD. Mason was getting stronger. Sure, he laughed more, ate better, and had enough energy to power a small city. But there was this pale look about him, this tiredness that didn't match the rest of his personality. He'd go from bouncing off walls to zoning out like a kid watching a documentary about grass. And call me paranoid, but after surviving the great betrayal of Luke and Sarah 2020, I didn't trust coincidences anymore. It started on a Sunday morning. Mason was sitting at the table poking his eggs like they owed him money. "You okay, bud?" I asked. "My tummy hurts," he mumbled. I frowned. The kid usually ate like a competitive eater on cheat day. "Since when?" "Yesterday. And I'm sleepy." Sleepy, pale, stomach pains. Yeah, I'd seen enough TV medical dramas to know that either he was dying or my cooking was. I ruled out food poisoning because I'd used actual eggs this time, not the powdered stuff from my bachelor survival kit. Still, I wasn't taking chances. "All right," I said. "We're going to see a doctor." He blinked. "Am I dying?" "No," I said. "But your attitude might be," he giggled, which reassured me a little, but I still threw him in the car and drove to the clinic like a man on a mission. I was half expecting a generic urgent care visit. In, out. Here's some Tylenol. Don't Google symptoms. But then we met her. Dr. Michelle Evans. Late 40s, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who probably scared lies for a living. Her office smelled like disinfectant and judgment. She looked over Mason's chart, then at me, and said, "So tell me everything." I gave her the whole saga. The fake disease, the grieving aunt, the sister with the emotional support, Margarita. She listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes while giving me the kind of look that says you've been through some serious soap opera nonsense, sir. When I was done, she sighed. "Let's run some tests just to be sure." "Sure," I said. "Test for what?" "Everything," she replied with the calm authority of someone who's already 10 steps ahead. 2 hours, 1 blood draw, and 3 juice boxes later, Mason was watching cartoons in the waiting room while I stared at the wall, trying not to spiral. Dr. Evans came back holding a file. Her expression was unreadable, which I've learned is medical code for you're about to learn something life-changing. "Mr. Hale," she began. "Luke," I corrected. "Mr. Hale sounds like a man who pays his taxes early," she smirked. "All right, Luke, here's the thing. Mason doesn't have a blood disorder. Not now. Not ever. My brain short-circuited. Come again. She handed me the report. He's malnourished severely. His body's been starving for months. That's why he's pale, weak, tired, not because of some rare illness. He's been neglected. I stared at the paper like it might rewrite itself if I blinked hard enough. Malnourished. The word hit me harder than the night I found that damn letter. You're saying he's sick because no one fed him? She nodded grimly. Consistently underfed, possibly emotional neglect, too. Whatever his caretakers told you was a lie. Caretakers? God, that word burned because those caretakers were my wife and her sister. I sank into the chair, jaw clenched. Images flashed through my mind. Sarah fussing over Mason's medication. Lisa crying about Dr. Bills. Both of them playing Florence Nightingale while this kid wasted away. Dr. Evans placed a hand on my shoulder. He's going to be okay. Kids bounce back fast when they're loved and fed properly. But you need to understand this wasn't an accident. This was systematic neglect. That word systematic made my blood boil. You're telling me they let him suffer just to what? Play victim. She gave me a look that said, you already know the answer. By the time we left the clinic, my mind was a tornado. Mason was in the back seat humming a song about dinosaurs, oblivious to the emotional earthquake that had just hit. I wanted to scream or punch a wall or drive straight to wherever Sarah and Keith were playing house and drop this medical report on their pillow with a note that said, enjoy hell. But I didn't. Instead, I stopped at a drive-thru and ordered Mason a kid's meal. I watched him tear into those fries like it was Christmas. And that's when it hit me. This kid didn't need revenge. He needed stability. Love. A chance to be a kid again. When we got home, I sat on the couch staring at the wall, the doctor's words echoing in my head. Mason climbed into my lap with his fries, offering me one like a peace treaty. Do I still have to take the medicine Aunt Sarah gave me? He asked. That question broke me a little. No, buddy, I said softly. You don't need that anymore. You just need real food and hugs. Lots of hugs. He grinned, mouth full of nuggets. I like hugs. Good, I said, because you're getting one every day until further notice. That night, after he went to bed, I dug through the old box of medical supplies Sarah used to keep. Pills, syrups, all neatly labeled with fake prescriptions. I sat there under the kitchen light, reading each label, realizing none of it was real. Not one. She'd bought over-the-counter vitamins, relabeled them, and played doctor. The rage that built up in me could have powered a city grid. My wife had lied to me, cheated on me, and now I found out she'd helped run a child neglect operation worthy of a documentary. If there was an award for most terrible human, she'd be the undefeated champ. I called Dr. Evans the next day. So, what do I do? I asked. Feed him, she said simply. Regular meals, balanced nutrition, and therapy for both of you, I laughed bitterly. Yeah, I can't wait to tell a therapist my wife ran off with my brother and faked a terminal illness for attention. Then make it a long session, she said dryly. That woman was my kind of sarcastic. From that day on, Mason's recovery became my mission. I made charts, meal plans, snack schedules. Hell, I could have opened a daycare. We replaced vitamins with real food, medicine with laughter. Every morning, he'd help me cook eggs, and every evening we'd make dinner together. He started gaining weight. His color returned. And for the first time, I saw what a healthy Mason looked like. Bright, loud, messy, alive. But healing him meant confronting myself, too. I'd been sleepwalking through life before all this. Living by routine, avoiding conflict, assuming love meant trust by default. Turns out love without boundaries is just a slow-motion disaster. One afternoon, I found Mason coloring at the table. He looked up and said, Uncle Luke, can I tell you something? Of course, bud. He hesitated, chewing his crayon again. When Aunt Sarah and Uncle Keith left, I thought it was my fault because I didn't finish my food. I froze. What? No. You didn't do anything wrong. He frowned. They said I had to eat better or they'd go away. My chest tightened. I knelt beside him. Hey, listen to me. None of that was your fault. They left because they're broken people. You didn't break them. They were already cracked. He blinked up at me, processing that with a kid's kind of wisdom. So, they're the ones who need time out. I smiled even though my throat burned. Yeah, forever time out. He giggled. Good. That night, after he went to bed, I opened my laptop and typed up a report. Everything Dr. Evans told me, plus the medical proof. I didn't send it anywhere yet, but it felt good knowing I had it. Like holding a loaded truth bomb, waiting for the perfect time to drop it. Weeks went by, Mason thrived. He learned to ride a bike, drew pictures of our family, and introduced me to his new imaginary friend named Bob the healthy dinosaur. We were good. No, better than good. We were happy. But every once in a while, I'd catch myself wondering what Sarah and Keith were doing. Did they ever think about Mason? Did guilt ever visit them at night? Or did they sleep fine, spooning each other in blissful idiocy? I hoped it haunted them. I hoped they couldn't walk past a grocery store without remembering the kid they left behind. But I wasn't going to chase them. I had something they didn't. Peace. One evening, Dr. Evans called to check in. "How's our little survivor?" she asked, eating me out of house and home. I said proudly. "He just discovered chicken nuggets." "Good sign," she said. "That means he's healing." "And you?" I hesitated. "Getting there. Still mad but functional." "Anger fades," she said. "Purpose doesn't." "You've given him both." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until I hung up. Because yeah, I was still angry, but now it had direction. The day Mason ran up to me and said, "I love you, Dad," I knew we'd made it. The lie was over. The damage done by Sarah and Lisa was fading, replaced by something stronger. Truth, consistency, real love. Dr. Evans had been right. Mason didn't need miracles. He just needed someone who showed up. And as for the women who caused it all, their day was coming. Because karma doesn't forget receipts. And thanks to one very sharp doctor, I had plenty. If you told me a year ago I'd be the guy Googling how to hide vegetables in chicken soup, I'd have laughed you out of the room. But there I was, apron on, kitchen timer ticking, pretending I knew what I was doing while Mason sat at the counter like a health inspector. Parenthood, I'd learned, was 90% improvisation and 10% prayers that nothing caught fire. After Dr. Evans exposed the starvation masquerading as illness scam, I swore Mason would never go hungry again. I stocked the fridge like I was prepping for the apocalypse. Milk, eggs, fruits, enough chicken to start my own farm. But what I didn't realize was that feeding a kid isn't just about food. It's about earning trust. The kid had been told eating made him sick. It was like trying to convince a cat to take a bath. Possible, but it required stealth, cunning, and emotional manipulation. The first night, I made chicken soup. He eyed it like I'd ladled poison into a bowl. "It smells weird," he said. "It smells like love and sodium," I replied, spooning some into his bowl. "Trust me, this is the cure to all evil," he frowned. "You said that about broccoli, and I was right, wasn't I?" "No," he said flatly. "Okay, tough crowd." I sat across from him, taking a dramatic slurp. "I might have to open a restaurant. You'd better eat some before Gordon Ramsay steals the recipe." He giggled. "Who's Gordon?" "Someone who yells at people for burning toast. My spirit animal." Slowly, cautiously, Mason dipped his spoon in and took a sip. His eyes widened. "It's good." "Don't sound so surprised," I said. But inside, I was doing victory laps. It wasn't just soup. It was the first step toward healing for both of us. From then on, dinner became our nightly adventure. Some nights were wins, spaghetti, pancakes, tacos. Others were experimental. I once tried making meatloaf and ended up with something that looked like a crime scene. Mason named it the Blob. We laughed so hard I forgot I'd nearly burned down the kitchen. But through the chaos, we built something solid, a rhythm, a bond. Mornings were a different kind of battle. Getting a 5-year-old dressed and ready for school made war strategy look simple. Mason had opinions, strong ones, about socks, cereal brands, and the correct number of chocolate chips and pancakes. One morning, I found him sitting on the floor in his underwear, refusing to move. "Not going," he declared. "You're going," I said, tying my tie with one hand and trying not to spill coffee with the other. "Nope." "Why not?" "My tummy says no." "Your tummy is a liar," I said. "Your tummy also said no to broccoli and yes to ice cream for dinner." He crossed his arms. "Ice cream never lies." I stared at him for a long second, then sighed. "You got me there." Eventually, bribery won. It always does. I promised him an extra bedtime story and suddenly education was worth it. Being both parent and provider wasn't easy. I'd drop him off at preschool, rush to work, juggle meetings, then pick him up at 5 o'clock and switch gears instantly from employee Luke to dad Luke. Sometimes I'd sit in the car, just breathing, mentally shifting between the two worlds. My boss Harris started noticing. "You look tired, Hale," he said one day. "Thanks, Harris. That's my skincare routine. Exhaustion." He laughed. "Rough nights. You ever try reasoning with a 5-year-old about bedtime? It's like negotiating with terrorists." To his credit, Harris gave me more flexibility. Take the morning slow, he said. Family first. That hit me. Family. The word had felt hollow since Sarah left. But Mason was changing that. We weren't blood, but we were bound by something stronger. Choice. After work, we had a ritual. Dinner, dishes, disaster movie. We'd eat, clean, and then watch something with explosions. Transformers, Jurassic Park, or Mason's favorite, Home Alone. He'd laugh every time the burglars slipped, and I'd laugh because his joy was contagious. Weekends became boot camp for everything I didn't know about parenting. I learned how to bandage knees, assemble Lego sets, wrong, apparently, and attend birthday parties without losing my mind. Parents at those parties were a different breed. All smiles, yoga pants, and passive-aggressive cupcakes labeled organic. When I introduced myself as Mason's uncle, there was always that look, pity mixed with curiosity. One mom whispered, "Single parenting?" "Bless your heart." I smiled politely. "Oh, I'm fine. I get all the hugs and none of the in-laws." That shut her up fast. The turning point came one rainy Saturday. Mason caught a cold, the kind that turns a child into a human tissue dispenser. His little nose was red, his eyes watery, and his energy gone. He lay on the couch watching cartoons wrapped in a blanket burrito. I panicked like any new parent does. I called Dr. Evans. "He's sneezing every 5 minutes," I said. "Congratulations," she said dryly. "He's human. Give him soup, fluids, rest. Not everything's a crisis." Easier said than done. I hovered like a helicopter with Wi-Fi. Every cough had me checking his temperature. He finally looked at me and said, "Uncle Luke, you're acting weird." "I'm not weird." I lied, rearranging the tissue box for the third time. "You're doing that thing where your eyebrows get scared." I blinked. "I don't have scared eyebrows." He giggled, then coughed, and I nearly dialed 911 out of habit. But by nightfall, the fever broke, and he was back to asking for pizza. Relief hit me like a wave. I made him a fresh bowl of soup and sat beside him. "Why do you make soup every time I'm sick?" he asked. "Because it's magic," I said. "It fixes everything." He nodded satisfied. "Then you need some too." "Why is that?" "Because your heart's still sick." I froze. Spoon madare. Out of the mouths of babes, right? He didn't mean it cruy. He was just being honest the way only kids can be. I looked at him and realized he was right. I'd been healing him, but I hadn't let myself heal. That night, after putting him to bed, I poured myself a drink and sat on the porch. The rain had stopped and the world was quiet except for the sound of crickets. For the first time in months, I didn't feel angry, just tired. But it was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from actually living. The next day, Mason woke up bouncing. "Can we make pancakes?" he asked again. "It's tradition." "Tradition started 3 days ago." "Yeah, but it's a good tradition." So, we made pancakes. And when he spilled half the batter, I didn't even care. The kitchen was chaos. But it was our chaos. Later that week, I got a call from Lisa. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Luke," she said, voice trembling. "Is Mason okay?" I laughed, bitter and tired. "He's more than okay. He's thriving." She started crying. "I made mistakes." "Yeah, plural," I said. "You and Sarah both, but you don't get to show up now and pretend you care. Please." I hung up. Maybe that was cruel, but forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door. That night, Mason drew a picture, me holding a bowl of soup and him wearing a superhero cape. He labeled it my dad and his magic soup. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. Then I realized something. I wasn't playing dad anymore. I was dad. When bedtime came, he said, "You're going to make soup forever, right?" "Forever is a long time, bud." "Good," he said, yawning. "I like forever." And I swear for the first time since my world blew up, forever didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like home. You ever blink and realize 15 years have sprinted past you like they had somewhere better to be? Yeah. One day you're arguing with a 5-year-old about broccoli, and the next that same kid's a 6-tall linebacker stealing your last slice of pizza. Mason grew up fast, too fast, and somehow managed to make me feel both proud and prehistoric at the same time. By the time he hit 20, the kid had turned into a force of nature. Built like an NFL draft pick, brain sharp enough for pre-med, and the same mischievous smirk that used to precede yogurt fights in the kitchen. The quiet, fragile little boy I took in had become a confident man with plans bigger than my grocery budget. We lived in a cozy 2-story place now, my house technically, but our home in every sense. There were dents in the hallway from Nerf wars, coffee stains on the couch, and trophies on every shelf. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I remember one Saturday morning vividly. I was at the kitchen counter trying to remember if I'd already had 2 cups of coffee or just one very strong existential crisis when Mason walked in, towel around his neck, sweat still clinging to him from a morning run. "Morning, old man," he said, grabbing a protein shake from the fridge. I raised an eyebrow. "Old man, watch your mouth, kid. I can still take you," he grinned. "Maybe in a staring contest." "You'd be surprised," I muttered, taking a sip of coffee. "Back in my day." Yeah, he interrupted, rolling his eyes. "You walked uphill both ways in the snow." "Heard it." "Actually," I said. "I was going to say, I once survived on instant noodles for a month." "That's toughness," he laughed. "That's sodium poisoning." It was moments like that, the playful back and forth, that reminded me how far we'd come. We'd built something real from the ashes of lies. Mason wasn't just my kid by circumstance anymore. He was my legacy. He was also the reason I hadn't gone fully gray yet, though he tried. One night, we were at a diner, his favorite post-workout ritual. He was scrolling through his phone, and I was pretending to read the menu, even though I always ordered the same thing. Then he said, "Hey, Dad." That word still hit me like a warm punch to the chest. "Yeah, you ever think about them?" The them hung heavy in the air. Sarah, Keith, the ghosts of my old life. I hadn't said their names in years. Not out loud. Anyway, I shrugged. "Not really." "What?" He leaned back, thoughtful. "I saw a woman today at the gym. Looked like her. Same hair, same face, maybe older." I thought, nah, can't be. My heart did this uncomfortable little dance. "Probably wasn't." "Probably," he said. But the tone in his voice told me he wasn't so sure. I changed the subject fast, asked about his classes, his friends, his plans for med school. But that night, when I got home, I sat on the porch and thought about it. The past, the people who'd once burned my world down and disappeared. I wondered if they ever looked back. Then, like the universe had been eavesdropping on my thoughts, it decided to get real dramatic. The following weekend, I was at the grocery store doing the most adult thing imaginable, comparing milk brands. I'm standing there holding 2 cartons, trying to remember which one Mason swore tasted like sadness, when I heard a voice behind me. "Luke." My hand froze mid-reach. That voice, soft, unsure, with a hint of fake sweetness I'd once been dumb enough to believe. I turned and time punched me in the face. There she was, Sarah. She looked older, still attractive in that polished, high-maintenance way, but life had definitely taken a few swings at her. Fine lines, dull eyes, a little puffiness around the face, the kind that comes from bad sleep and worse decisions. And next to her, Keith, my brother, the man who'd once promised to have my back and instead took my wife. He was bolder, thicker around the middle, and wearing a golf shirt 2 sizes too tight. His face had that permanent red tint of someone who thought light beer was hydration. For a moment, none of us spoke. It was like running into your past mistakes at full speed. Then Sarah smiled. That same fake polished smile. "Wow, Luke, you look good." "Still have both kidneys," I said, "so yeah, doing great." Keith forced a laugh. "Man, it's been what, 15 years? 16. I said because of course I'd counted. Sarah's eyes darted nervously. "We didn't expect to see you here." "Really?" I said because I live 10 minutes away. "You know, in the city where you both abandoned a 5-year-old. Wild coincidence." She flinched. Keith cleared his throat. "How's Mason?" That name coming out of his mouth made me see red. "Alive," I said flatly. "Thriving. Thanks for asking." Keith gave me a crooked grin. The same one that used to charm waitresses into giving him extra fries. "Didn't think you'd keep him this long." My jaw tightened. "Didn't think you'd make it this long without a DUI." Sarah's smile faltered. "We were young, Luke. We made mistakes." "Yeah, plural," I said. "But hey, at least you were consistent." They exchanged a look. That silent shared guilt that only partners in crime get. Keith tried to recover. "So, still single?" I smirked happily. "Turns out life's quieter without traitors in it." Sarah laughed awkwardly, brushing her hair behind her ear like that would erase a decade of deceit. "You always had such a sharp tongue. And you always had terrible taste in men," I said, nodding toward Keith. He puffed his chest. "Careful, Luke." "Oh, relax," I said, grabbing a carton of milk. "You're safe. I don't fight unarmed men." It was petty, sure, but it felt so good. They both stood there blinking, clearly unsure how to handle me. The version of Luke who wasn't broken anymore. The Luke who traded heartbreak for humor, anger for peace, and pity for purpose. Sarah finally said, "We've been through a lot." "Me, too," I said. "Mostly therapy and therapy bills, worth every penny." She hesitated. "I heard about Mason. Heard he's doing well." I raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "The ghost of common decency." She frowned. "You don't have to be cruel." "Actually," I said, smiling faintly, "I kind of do. It's part of the healing process." Keith shifted uncomfortably. "You still hold grudges, huh?" "No," I said, setting my milk in the cart. "I hold receipts." And with that, I turned to leave, fully intending to end the conversation there. But then Sarah said something that stopped me cold. "You know," she began softly, "we've always wondered how you managed with Mason. I mean, it couldn't have been easy." I looked over my shoulder and gave her a smile. "So, come it scared even me." "You're right. It wasn't easy. But the difference between us, Sarah, is I don't quit when things get hard." Her face fell. Keith's eyes darted away. For the first time, I saw them not as villains, just pathetic people crushed under their own lies. I started pushing my cart away, but before I could turn the corner, Keith called out. "So, what's Mason up to these days?" I paused, slowly turned back. "Oh," I said casually. "You'll see." And I meant it because fate, karma, and poetic timing were all on my side. They just didn't know it yet. That night, I told Mason about the encounter. He listened quietly, face unreadable. When I finished, he said, "So, they're back apparently." He nodded slowly. "Good. I was wondering when karma would put them on the calendar." I grinned. "You're not mad?" He shook his head. "Mad? No, but I do hope they run into me someday." "Well," I said, raising an eyebrow. "Funny you should say that because as much as I tried to leave the past behind, it looked like the past wasn't done crashing my grocery trips just yet." And something in Mason's smirk told me that when that day came, the reunion would make the Milk All Showdown look like a warm-up act. You know that thing people say about karma being patient? Turns out karma shops at the same grocery store as I do. The very next week, I found myself right back in that fluorescent lit jungle, standing between the milk and yogurt aisles, face to face with the ghosts of bad decisions past, Sarah and Keith. They hadn't changed much since our awkward Milk All reunion. Sarah still had that "I moisturized but don't apologize" glow, and Keith still looked like a man who could lose a fight with a treadmill. I was hoping the encounter would be brief, maybe a polite nod, a passive-aggressive smile, and then I could grab my 2% and leave, but nope. These two had come armed with arrogance and boredom, the most dangerous combo known to man. Heath grinned first. That old smug tilt of the chin that used to mean he was about to borrow money or ruin a family gathering. "Luke," he said as if we were old pals bumping into each other at a barbecue. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon." "I live here," I said dryly. "In the city, not the dairy aisle, though the yogurt's more honest company." Sarah chuckled, but it sounded forced, brittle. "You always did have a way with words." "Yeah," I said. "Some people write poems. I write comebacks." I tried to sidestep, but Keith moved his cart right into my path, pretending to look at a shelf of cheese sticks. So he said casually, "You really still raising Mason? Thought that was a temporary thing." I blinked. "Temporary thing? You mean the child you abandoned like last week's leftovers?" Sarah frowned. "Don't be dramatic, Luke." "Oh, sorry," I said. "You're right. The correct term is felony neglect." "My mistake," Keith snorted. "You always were sensitive and you always were useless," I said. "Glad to see some things haven't changed." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, man, I get it. You're still sore about what happened, but people move on." I raised an eyebrow. "People move on. Siblings don't move in." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Can we not do this here?" "Oh, no. Let's absolutely do this here," I said. "Right between the yogurt and the regret section. Seems fitting." The people nearby were starting to notice. A mom with a toddler in her cart pretended to read the label on almond milk while clearly eavesdropping. An older guy from produce peeked around a corner like he was watching daytime TV. Sarah leaned on her cart, her tone turning syrupy sweet. "So tell me, Luke, still single?" I smiled. "Still allergic to narcissists?" That got a few chuckles from the bystanders. I didn't plan to have an audience, but since I did, I figured I might as well give them a show. Keith crossed his arms. "Guess Mason didn't turn out great, huh?" I tilted my head. "Why?" Because he's not out here stealing wives or skipping out on kids. Sarah's mouth dropped open. You don't have to be cruel. Oh, trust me, I said. If I was being cruel, you'd need a therapist and a lawyer by now. That's when Keith smirked. The kind of smirk that says, I think I'm about to win this argument. Which was funny because history clearly showed he'd never won anything that didn't involve dumb luck. Come on, man. You're acting like you're some kind of hero. You got stuck with a kid that isn't even yours. That's not noble. That's pathetic. For a second, I didn't even reply. I just looked at him. The silence stretched until even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to pause. Then I smiled. Calm. Dangerous. You know what's pathetic, Keith? Running off with your brother's wife and then thinking you've upgraded. You two deserve each other. Half a conscience each. Maybe you make a whole person. Sarah gasped. Keith's smug expression cracked. I leaned closer and lowered my voice. And for the record, Mason's doing just fine. Better than both of you combined. You'll see. Sarah blinked. What's that supposed to mean? You'll find out, I said, turning my cart. But of course, fate wasn't done stirring the pot. Keith followed me to the checkout line like an annoying mall salesman. You always were dramatic, he said. I turned, sighing. And you always were background noise. Go away. He scoffed. You're still angry. You know what that means, right? You're not over her. I laughed. Actually laughed. Buddy, the only thing I'm not over is how dumb I was for trusting you. But don't flatter yourself. These days, I need you too like I need food poisoning. He opened his mouth, probably to say something about forgiveness or moving on, but I cut him off with a smirk. Tell me, Keith, you still sleeping with one eye open? Can't imagine sharing a bed with someone who's already cheated on one brother. Statistically, you're next. That shut him up. The cashier, a college kid with blue hair, nearly dropped his scanner, trying not to laugh. Sarah grabbed Keith's arm, glaring at me. You've become bitter. Wrong again, I said. I've become better. Bitter's what happens when you fail to learn. You two are experts in that department. I paid for my groceries, bagged them myself, and gave the cashier an apologetic grin. Sorry for the drama, she whispered. Don't be. That was better than Netflix. As I walked toward the exit, I could still feel their eyes burning holes in my back. But instead of anger, I felt lighter, freer. I realized that for the first time in forever, I wasn't the guy who'd been betrayed. I was the guy who'd survived it, outgrown it, and was finally getting the last laugh. Of course, karma wasn't quite done. As I pushed my car to the car, I heard Sarah's voice again, sharper now. You think you've won, Luke? You think raising that boy makes you better than us? I stopped, turned, and smiled. No, raising him doesn't make me better. It makes me what you'll never be. Decent. That one landed hard. I loaded my groceries, climbed into my car, and sat there for a moment. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't anger. It was adrenaline. Closure, maybe. A long overdue dose of justice served cold, right next to the frozen piece. When I got home, Mason was on the couch, laptop open, studying. You okay? He asked, glancing up. Yeah, I said, setting the bags down. Ran into some old acquaintances, he raised an eyebrow. Acquaints? Or the people we don't mention after dark? I smirked. The latter, he grinned. How'd it go? Oh, you know, I said, pulling out the milk. They tried small talk. I tried sarcasm. Pretty sure I won. He laughed. You always do. I hesitated, watching him for a second. They asked about you. He looked up. Really? Yeah, I said. They think you're not doing great. He leaned back, a slow smirk spreading across his face. Then maybe it's time to prove them wrong. I grinned. Oh, trust me, you already have. He stood, closing his laptop. You know, Dad, I used to think the best revenge was showing up to their door one day with success written all over me. But now, I think the best revenge is just living well and letting them hear about it. Smart kid, I said. Who taught you that? He shrugged. Some old guy who can't cook meatloaf, but knows a thing or two about surviving betrayal. I laughed, tossing him a grocery bag. Watch it, smartass. He caught it easily. So, what's for dinner? Chicken soup, I said automatically. He groaned again. Tradition, I said. Also, I didn't buy anything else because a couple of idiots cornered me in the dairy aisle. He shook his head, amused. You really need to switch stores. Maybe, I said, but this one has excellent revenge acoustics. We both laughed, and as I started unpacking, I realized something. The circus might have followed me to the supermarket. But for the first time, I wasn't the clown. I was the ringmaster. And the show was just getting started. I didn't plan on seeing Sarah and Keith again so soon. But life apparently thought I deserved an encore performance. 2 days after the Betrayal debacle, I was at a local cafe nursing my sanity through caffeine therapy. When who strutted in? But the dynamic duo of regret and stupidity. They were dressed like life had gone on. Keith in his signature golf shirt because apparently he thought khaki was a lifestyle, and Sarah in that same smug confidence she used to wear like perfume. I swear they had radar for my piece. I saw them before they saw me, and my first thought was I could pretend I'm invisible. But then fate, being the sarcastic playwright it is, decided that would be too easy. Keith spotted me mid-sip. Luke. Well, if it isn't my favorite brother. I almost spit out my coffee. Favorite brother? You've only got one. Genius. Sarah laughed, brushing her perfectly styled hair. Wow. You're still full of jokes, huh? Yeah. I said, standing up. You're still full of something, too. It just doesn't smell like humor. They blinked. Perfect. I had their attention. Keith tried to play peacemaker. His voice smooth in that fake way people use when they're trying to convince you not to punch them. Look, Luke, we didn't mean to upset you at the store. You sit me? I asked, incredulous. Buddy, you couldn't upset me if you tried. I've been through therapy, heartbreak, and raising a teenager. You're just background noise now. Sarah frowned. We just wanted to clear the air. Oh, so now you're into climate change activism, I said. Good for you, Luke. Come on, she said, her tone slipping into that patronizing sing-song voice that once fooled me. It's been years. We've moved on, haven't you? I tilted my head, smiled, and said, you're standing here explaining yourself to the man you betrayed. I'd say I've moved further than you. A few customers nearby turned their heads. The barista paused mid-foam. Oh, we were about to make this everyone's entertainment. Keith crossed his arms, clearly annoyed. You think you're better than us now, don't you? No, I said calmly. I know I am, he chuckled. You really think raising that kid makes you some kind of saint? Not a saint, I said, sipping my coffee. Just a decent human being, which in your family is apparently rare. Sarah's jaw tightened. You don't know everything, Luke. Oh, you mean the part where your sister faked her kid's terminal illness and you helped cover it up? No. Yeah, that was a fun discovery. My favorite part was finding out your miracle medication was just over-the-counter vitamins. Sarah froze. Keith blinked, confused. Wait, what? I grinned. Oh, you didn't know, did you? Turns out your wife, my ex-wife, moonlighted as a medical fraudster. Mason wasn't dying. He was starving. I found out after you two skipped town. Doctor said neglect was the diagnosis. You know, your family really should stop using tragedy as a hobby. Sarah's face drained of color. Keith's confusion twisted into something else. Anger, maybe shame. She said it was a blood condition. He muttered. Yeah. And she also said, you were better in bed than me. I shot back. So maybe her judgment isn't the gold standard. The cafe went dead silent. The barista dropped a cup. A college kid in the corner let out a quiet damn. Sarah hissed. You don't have to humiliate us. Oh, but I do, I said, stepping closer. Because you humiliated me for years. You lied, you cheated, and you left a child behind like a used napkin. So, if the truth embarrasses you, maybe stop making it so entertaining. Keith tried to puff up, chest out like he was about to deliver a lecture. You can't talk to her like that. Funny, I said. You didn't say that when you were sneaking into my house to do a different kind of talking. Sarah gasped. God, Luke, you're so bitter. Bitter? No, I'm better. Big difference. One needs therapy. The other pays for it. Keith's voice wavered. We made mistakes. People do things when they're in love. I laughed so loud the cafe owner looked up from the counter. Love? That wasn't love. That was boredom with better lighting. You two didn't fall in love. You fell into each other's stupidity and called it fate. Sarah's lips trembled, but she tried to recover, flicking her hair back like she was in a shampoo commercial. You always twist everything into a joke. No, I said quietly. I twist the knife into the truth. Difference. I could have walked away then, left them with their guilt and overpriced lattes, but I wasn't done. Not yet. I leaned in, lowering my voice. You want to hear something really funny? I hired a private investigator after you left. He dug into your fresh start. Turns out Sarah's sister wasn't the only liar. While you two were off playing house, She was busy club hopping, pretending to grieve her dead nephew. And you, Keith, you were funding it out of my old joint savings account. Keith blinked. That's not possible. Oh, it's possible, I said. See, the thing about betrayal is it leaves paper trails. You bought her that condo, didn't you? And that car? The one she inherited from an aunt that never existed. Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Keith turned to her. You told me your mom helped you buy that. Keith, he stepped back. You lied to me. I crossed my arms. Oh, come on, Keith. You really thought the woman who cheated on her husband wouldn't cheat on her second husband? Don't act shocked. I figured this sequel was inevitable. Sarah's voice shook. You're just trying to ruin my life. I smirked. You're doing fine on your own. I'm just narrating. Keith was fuming now. Are you saying I cut him off? Yep. She was still seeing someone else while you were playing family man. You're welcome for the update. For once, Sarah didn't have a comeback. Her hands trembled as she tried to collect herself. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You're lying. Oh, that's rich, I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. You want receipts? I've got them. I opened a photo of a report, the pie summary, complete with timestamps and photos. I slid it across the table. Consider it light reading. She stared at it, her face collapsing like bad foundation under ring. Keith leaned over her shoulder, his eyes narrowing with every line he read. Then he froze, his voice barely above a whisper. Who's Daniel? Oh yeah, there it was. The cherry on top. Sarah looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her. He was just a friend. Sure, I said. Just like Keith was my brother. Weird how that word keeps losing meaning around you. Keith pushed back his chair, the legs screeching across the floor. You lied to me for years. Sarah's voice cracked. Keith, he raised a hand. Don't. I should have known. You ruin everything you touch. I sipped my coffee and muttered. Can confirm. Keith stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Sarah just stood there shaking. For the first time in a long time, she looked small, deflated, like the facade had finally cracked all the way through. She turned to me, tears brimming. You got what you wanted. Are you happy? I stared at her for a moment. No, I said softly. Just finished. I walked out, leaving her with her coffee, her mess, and her ghosts. When I got home, Mason was in the living room watching TV. Hey, he said. You okay? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, just tied up a few loose ends. He raised an eyebrow. Loose ends with names and social security numbers. I chuckled. You're too smart for your own good. He smirked. You finally told them off, didn't you? Oh, I did more than that, I said. I returned the truth. Express delivery. He leaned back, grinning. Bet that felt good. It did, I admitted. But you know what felt better? What? Not caring if they believed it or not. Mason smiled. Guess we're done with ghosts, huh? I nodded. Done and dusted. He tilted his head. So, what happens next? I smiled, tossing him a car key. Next, you and I go out for dinner. Something loud, greasy, and entirely unholy. My treat. He caught it. Mid-air deal. As we walked out the door, I felt lighter. Not the kind of light that comes from revenge, but the kind that comes from release. The past had been heavy, but it wasn't mine to carry anymore. Sarah's lies, Keith's betrayal, the family drama, it all stayed behind, sealed in that cafe like a bad sitcom finale. The truth was finally out and it was glorious. There are moments in life when time stops. Not metaphorically, but actually stops. Like the universe hits pause just to let you soak in the absurdity of it all. For me, that moment happened in the same grocery store where this entire melodrama started. The milk section, a place apparently cursed with my family trauma. 2 weeks had passed since the cafe showdown where I detonated the truth like a bomb in a porcelain shop. Keith had stormed out. Sarah had crumbled and I'd left them both sitting in the wreckage of their own lies. I figured that was the end of it. Curtain call, fade to black. Roll credits. Except life doesn't believe in clean endings. It prefers sequels. That Saturday, I was back at the store grabbing last-minute groceries for Mason's big interview weekend. He'd been accepted into 3 med programs already, and this one, his dream school, was the final round. The kid was 20 now, taller than me, sharper than I ever was, but he still texted like a 5-year-old. Get milk. Real milk, not almond sadness. So, there I was comparing expiration dates like a responsible adult when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Luke. I didn't even turn at first. I knew that voice. That tired, cracked, slightly desperate voice that used to command a room but now barely held itself together. Sarah, I said finally, not looking up. Back to haunt dairy products again. She gave a shaky laugh. I had to talk to you. I sighed, setting the milk in my cart. You've had 16 years to talk, Sarah. You used your words to write a goodbye letter instead. I deserve that, she said softly. No, I said, finally turning toward her. You deserve a restraining order. But we'll start small. She looked worn out. The makeup couldn't hide the lines that weren't there before. Whatever charm she once had was gone, burned out, like a candle that had run out of wax. I just wanted to see him, she said. Mason, I saw on social media that he's grown. He looks happy. Yeah, I said. Happiness tends to happen when people aren't starving. She winced. I know I've done terrible things, Luke, but he's still my family. I just want to see him. I studied her for a second. You left him to die, Sarah. You and your sister turned his childhood into a diet plan. You forfeited family when you picked convenience over care. She swallowed. People can change. Sure, I said. But you haven't. Before she could respond, a new voice joined the party. Familiar, deeper, and entirely unexpected. Dad, you ready? I turned and there he was, Mason. Dressed sharp, suit perfectly fitted, posture confident. The kid didn't just grow up. He'd arrived. The way he carried himself, you could tell life hadn't broken him. It had trained him. Sarah froze. Is that Mason? He looked at her, expression calm, but unreadable. Yeah, he said. The kid you left to die. You could have heard a pin drop. Every shopper nearby stopped pretending to read yogurt labels and went full audience mode. Sarah's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mason, she whispered. He raised a hand. Don't. You don't get to Mason me like we're catching up over brunch. Her eyes filled with tears. I know I can't undo the past, but I just wanted to tell you how sorry I am. He nodded slowly. You know what's funny? I used to rehearse this moment in my head when I was a kid. I thought if I ever saw you again, I'd cry or yell or something dramatic. But right now, I feel nothing. Her lip trembled. You have every right to hate me. He shook his head. I don't hate you. Hate would mean I still care enough to feel something. You're just a story I tell about how I got stronger. Oof. That line hit harder than anything I could have scripted. I glanced at Sarah. She looked like someone had sucked the air out of her lungs. Mason, she said softly. Please, I just want to explain. He cut her off, his voice steady but cold. Explain what? That you and Aunt Lisa lied about me being sick? That you let me starve while you partied? Or that you disappeared with my uncle, and left me with a man who wasn't even my dad, but became one anyway? She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, I was scared. He laughed, a humorless sound. You were selfish. Don't confuse the two. Keith appeared out of nowhere then, like bad timing was his superpower. He looked rough, puffy face, eyes tired, shirt untucked like he'd been sleeping in his car. What's going on? He asked, scanning the scene. Sarah turned to him. It's Mason. He's here. Keith froze. For a second, the same dumb smirk tried to climb onto his face, but it didn't make it. Wow, he said awkwardly. You've grown, kid. Mason tilted his head. You don't get to call me that. Keith frowned. Come on, I know. Mason said, you were the guy who taught me what betrayal looks like. Congratulations. Lesson stuck. Keith looked like he wanted to argue, but realized there was no comeback for that. He turned to me instead. So what, Luke? You filled his head with hate for us. I stepped closer, smiling just enough to be unsettling. No, Keith. I filled his stomach with food and his heart with truth. Turns out that's all it takes to erase you. He scowled. You think you're better than us? I don't think it, I said. I know it. And deep down. So, do you? Sarah grabbed Keith's arm. Let's just go. But Mason wasn't finished. Actually, before you go, he said calmly. I have something to say. They both turned toward him. He took a breath, voice firm but clear. I used to think my life started the day you left me, but that's not true. My life started the day he stayed. He pointed to me. You two taught me what love isn't. He showed me what love is. Sarah's tears spilled. Mason, please. He held up a hand again. No, you don't get to cry. You don't get to play victim. You already used up your sympathy card 16 years ago. Then he turned to me and said, let's go, Dad. Time stopped. That word, Dad. It wasn't the first time he'd said it, but saying it in front of them hit differently. It was vindication, justice, and love. All rolled into one syllable. Sarah's sob turned into a gasp. "Dad," she whispered, staring at me like she'd just realized karma had good aim. I smiled gently. "Yeah, that's my son." We turned and walked away, the sound of silence chasing us down the aisle. The shoppers went back to pretending they weren't emotionally invested, but the looks on their faces said it all. They just watched a live episode of Family Feud, Consequences Edition. Outside, the sun was blinding, the air crisp. Mason exhaled, shoulders relaxing. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, that felt good." "Yeah," I said, grinning. "You hit them harder than karma ever could," he laughed softly. "Guess I learned from the best." As we loaded the groceries, he said, "You know, I don't think I ever really got to thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For staying, for saving me, for making sure I never turned into them." I felt my throat tighten. "You don't have to thank me, kid. You saved me, too." He smiled, closing the trunk. "Still think I should have let you handle that milk all drama alone." I chuckled. "No, I think the milk has finally witnessed some justice." He looked at me, eyes bright. "You think they'll ever change? People like them?" I shrugged. "Maybe, but even if they do, it's too late. We already did." As we drove home, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. The kind of silence that comes when everything you've ever wanted to say has finally been said. That night, Mason posted a picture online. Him and me laughing over dinner. The caption read, "Family isn't who gives you life. It's who gives you a reason to live it." I stared at that post for a long time, heart full. The moment at the grocery store had frozen time, but it also thawed something inside me. The anger, the hurt, the what-ifs, they were gone. And in their place was pride. Pride for the man that kid had become. Pride for the life we'd built out of betrayal's ashes. The past had finally stopped knocking. The present had answered instead. Revenge gets a bad rep. People think it's all fire, fury, and slow-motion explosions like an action movie. Truth is, real revenge is quieter. It's a steak dinner you savor while your enemies are choking on microwave noodles. It's peace disguised as victory. A few months after the grocery store showdown, the ripples finally caught up to the people who started the storm. News travels fast in small towns and faster when it's scandal-shaped. Keith and Sarah's power couple reputation cracked like cheap glass, and everyone who used to smile at them in public started crossing the street instead. I didn't celebrate. Okay, fine. I celebrated a little, maybe once, with a beer and a playlist titled "Justice is Delicious." I hadn't seen them since that day with Mason, but I heard enough through the grapevine to know karma had clocked in early and was working overtime. Keith had apparently gone full midlife crisis meets bad decisions. The man who used to brag about his construction business lost half his clients when word spread about his morality malfunction. Turns out people don't want to hire a guy who stole his brother's wife and left a child to starve. Shocking, right? The last I heard, he was working part-time at a car wash and arguing with teenagers about tip jars. Sarah, her fall was cinematic. She'd been living off Keith's money for years. And when that ran out, she tried the sympathy route. Social media posts about regret and finding faith. It might have worked, except the internet's undefeated at digging up old skeletons. Someone found photos of her and Lisa on vacation during the Masons' dying era. And let's just say people weren't forgiving. The comment section turned into a digital bonfire. The real kicker, word got out that their perfect daughter, born a year after their scandalous getaway, wasn't Keith's. DNA test confirmed it. Karma didn't just show up. It brought snacks and a front row seat. When I found out, I was sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, sunrise in full glory. Mason had texted me the headline with nothing but a smirking emoji. I laughed so hard the neighbors probably thought I'd lost it. He came out onto the porch, hair a mess, still in his sleep shirt. "You good, old man?" "Oh, better than good," I said, showing him the phone. He squinted at the screen. "Wow, took them long enough." "Yeah," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Karma drives slow, but it doesn't miss," he laughed. "You think they ever stop and wonder how it all went wrong?" "Probably," I said. "But they'll blame everyone but themselves. That's their talent," he nodded, thoughtful. "Guess they finally got what they gave." "Exactly," I said, sipping my coffee. "You can't outrun the bill when you dine on betrayal." Mason looked at me for a moment. "You don't sound angry anymore." I smiled. "That's because I'm not. Anger's heavy, kid. You carry it long enough, it becomes your whole identity. I set mine down a while back," he smirked. Guess that's your version of therapy. That and whiskey, I said, grinning. But yeah, therapy helped, too. We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the morning unfold. Birds chirping, sunlight cutting through the trees. Peace had a sound, and this was it. A week later, Mason officially graduated med school. The ceremony was surreal. Seeing him in that cap and gown walking across the stage, I swear my heart grew 3 sizes. The applause felt personal, like the universe was saying, "You did it, Luke. You didn't just survive. You raised a damn good man." Afterward, we went out to dinner. His choice, a fancy steakhouse that made me check my credit card limit twice. The waiter probably thought we were celebrating a wedding proposal with how happy we looked. "To us," Mason said, raising his glass. "To us," I repeated. "The world's most dysfunctional family success story." He grinned. "Think Mom's watching this from somewhere." I paused. "If she is, I hope she's taking notes," he chuckled. "You ever wonder what you'd say to her now if she showed up?" I thought for a moment. Probably nothing. Silence says more than words ever could. Besides, she already heard everything she needed to that day in the store. Mason leaned back. "You're a bigger man than I'd be." "No," I said, "I just ran out of energy to stay angry. Besides, she taught me something. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference." He smiled. "Guess you're fluent in indifference now." "Professional level," I said, clinking my glass against his. Later that night, after the dinner, we walked out into the city lights. Mason looked around at the skyline, hands in his pockets. "You know," he said. "You should be proud." "I am," I said, "of you." He shook his head. "No, I mean of you. You took the worst situation possible and turned it into a life. You didn't let it define you." I laughed. "Oh, it defined me for a while. I just decided to rewrite the definition." He nodded. "You ever think about dating again?" "Hell no," I said instantly. "The last woman I trusted ran off with my brother. I think I've met my quota." He laughed so hard he nearly dropped his jacket. "Come on, Dad. You can't let them win like that." "I'm not," I said. "I just like sleeping diagonally and not explaining why the thermostat set to 68. He grinned. "Fair point." The drive home was quiet, peaceful. Mason fell asleep halfway through, his head tilted against the window, the faintest smile on his face. I glanced at him and thought about all we'd been through. The lies, the loss, the rebuilding. The house felt alive when we got home. Photos lined the walls. Snapshots of our journey. Mason's first day of school, our disastrous camping trip, the dog he rescued last year. No ghosts left, no reminders of Sarah, just proof that life could be rebuilt from ruins. Later that week, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Luke," the voice was small, fragile. "Sarah," I said, recognizing it instantly. "You shouldn't be calling me. I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For raising him," she said quietly. "For giving him a life I couldn't." I was silent for a moment. "You didn't have to thank me. You just had to not abandon him." "I know," she said. "I live with that every day." There was something in her tone, not manipulation this time, but something close to sincerity. Maybe life had finally humbled her. Maybe it was too late. "I'm glad he turned out okay," she said finally. "He didn't turn out okay," I said softly. "He turned out amazing. Despite you," she sighed. "You really don't have any forgiveness left, do you?" "Forgiveness?" "Yes," I said. "Access to my life again." "No," she didn't argue. Just whispered. "Take care, Luke." "Already am," I said, hanging up. And that was it. The final loose thread cut clean. Months later, Mason's engagement dinner rolled around. The restaurant buzzed with laughter, friends, and music. When he gave a toast, he started by saying, "Most people thank their parents separately. I just need to thank one." Everyone clapped. I pretended I had something in my eye. After the dinner, he raised his glass toward me and said, "We did it, Dad." I clinked mine against his. "We sure did, kid." He grinned. "Guess and Sarah was my biggest motivator." "Mine, too," I said with a smirk. Nothing inspires self-improvement like being betrayed by amateurs. He burst out laughing. And so did I for a long time. The kind of laughter that shakes loose the last bits of pain still clinging to your ribs. Later, as we drove home, Mason said quietly, "You think revenge was worth it?" I thought for a second. Revenge? No, it wasn't about that anymore. It was about peace. But peace is the best revenge, isn't it? He smiled. "Guess it is." And as we pulled into the driveway, I realized something. Revenge hadn't come with rage or fireworks. It came with calm mornings, loud laughter, and a son who called me dad. That was my victory. That was my closure. No grand speeches, no fiery justice, just peace, rich, quiet, and finally mine.